Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. And in this video, I'm going to be looking at the week starting on Monday, January the 13th, 2025. This is, I think, going to be a fairly quick video, and I'm going to start off by looking at what's happening over the coming week, the week starting on January the 13th. I'm just going to be looking at the main astrological events. And having done that, I want to consider the North Node. The North Node is in Pisces now. I mean, the true North Node. There is a mean node which is still in Aries, but the true node is now in Pisces, and I think I use the true node rather than the mean node. And I just want to consider in general what it might mean, and it is somewhat general, and I'll look at a few examples of events that took place, historical events of some importance, which took place while the North Node was in Pisces in the past. I'm not saying that this will necessarily tell us very much, but I thought I would at least go through the process of taking a few examples. And having done that, I want to consider the I Ching for the week ahead, for the week starting on January the 13th, Monday, January the 13th, and I'll be looking at it things from a general perspective. Then I'll look at money, then career and business, and finally relationships. So anyway, let's look at the week ahead starting on Monday, January the 13th. So here is a picture of the week start, the moment the new week starts at midnight on January the 13th. So you can see the North Node is in at 2946 Pisces. So remember, the North Node goes backwards by and large. Okay, the true node sort of goes back and forth a little bit, but the overall trend is backwards. And so it's kind of the first full week where the North Node is in Pisces, and so that is a change. I'm not going to talk about it now because I'm going to talk about it in a few minutes' time when I look at the North Node specifically. And as far as other things going on, well, the week starts with the Sun being trine Uranus. There is the Sun at 23 Capricorn, trine Uranus. So this aspect happens twice a year, and it's therefore not particularly unusual. But when you have Sun trine Uranus, it perhaps stirs things up, and it might create a bit of change in its wake, especially when it happens at the same time as a full moon. And indeed, on Monday, could be on Tuesday, depending on your time zone, we do have a full moon when the moon is in Cancer, opposition the Sun in Capricorn. So full moon, perhaps we start to see things for what they are. That's always something that can happen on full moons. Full moons are about revelations, understanding the truth of the matter. And also, it may be that there is a peak of some kind. You know, whatever started on December the 30th, 31st with when there was a new moon, that was of course 2024, last year, has now developed to such a point that we may feel that it has peaked. And the moon, of course, is no longer waxing. So you have the waxing side of the moon is from new moon to full moon, then you've got the waning from full moon to the next new moon. And so with the moon starting to wane, all things being equal, do become a little less fortunate. And we just feel that something is perhaps coming to an end, and we're sort of preparing for the new, but the new hasn't arrived yet. It's still very much the old. Of course, if you're into Chinese astrology, it's the end of the it's the end of the Chinese New Year. Of course, the Chinese New Year starts at the next new moon, and as I said, I'm not into Chinese astrology, not really. I don't really know very much about it, but someone told me that very often often people just before the beginning of the Chinese New Year, they don't take action. I mean, why take action? It is the end of the year, and of course, this sort of ties in with Western astrology as well, because now the moon is waning, and so perhaps we should put on hold any projects we're working on, anything we thought we might want to get going on, but maybe we should wait until the new moon, which is going to obviously be in around 2 weeks' time, and so that's the full moon, and then we also have a 45-degree aspect between Mars and Jupiter. We have been feeling this aspect over the weekend. I mean, Mars and Jupiter are both of them moving relatively slowly, so it's not like the Mars-Jupiter semi-square is exact one moment and after exactitude it's gone. I mean, it's been building up, and it's exact, I think, early on Tuesday. Maybe even late on Monday, again, depending on your time zone. And, Mars and Jupiter are about energy, having perhaps too much energy, a lot of energy. We don't know what to do with it. And so that energy can get out of hand. And it also comes at a time when Mercury is sesquiquadrate Uranus. So Mercury sesquiquadrate Uranus is perhaps more about mental energy. But it can be a little bit troublesome. Mercury doesn't quite know what to focus on, but it keeps moving, and we can have ideas that we can't let go of. So there could be a certain sort of destructive feel to that Mercury sesquiquadrate Uranus. But on the plus side, Mercury sesquiquadrate Uranus can be about ideas, having sudden ideas about something and feeling we absolutely want to put it into action. Though still, if we do get an idea and we're desperate to put it into action, maybe we should wait a little bit. Perhaps we should wait until the new moon. I mean, sorry, I've kept on talking about the new moon. I should tell you when exactly that new moon is. So that new moon is January the 29th. So that's when at 9:51 Aquarius. So that's when the new lunar cycle will start. Then on January the 16th, which is a Thursday, we have the Sun opposition Mars. And Sun opposition Mars is quite a fiery aspect. I mean, I know that it's not in fire signs, it's in sort of negative signs. It's in Sun in Capricorn, opposition Mars in Cancer. But still, it is quite fiery in its own way. And we just had the fires in Los Angeles, and so you kind of associate Sun opposition Mars with fire, but it may be about aggravation, human fire. It could be about accidents, mishaps, taking things too seriously and going too far without really thinking it through. So that Sun opposition Mars it's potentially quite a destructive energy, but I'll be looking at that aspect in detail in a few days' time. And then over the weekend, got Mercury sextile Saturn. I mean, that's a fairly gentle aspect, perhaps allows us to maybe focus on things in a serious way and sort of get things together and to get a perspective. And then the Sun moves into Aquarius. So it kind of sounds good, Sun in Aquarius. I mean, Aquarius, as a sign, I suppose, got such good press since the 60s with hair and the age of Aquarius. Of course, the age of Aquarius doesn't start for centuries, but still people get excited about Sun in Aquarius. Reality is that all things being equal, Aquarius is the worst sign for the sun to be in. The reason being that the sun rules Leo, so by definition it's in its detriment in Aquarius. And if you take a point system, the kind of point system William Lilly used in Christian astrology, when the sun moves into Aquarius, it gets -5. It gets +5 if it's in Leo, and -5 if it's in Aquarius. So I suppose that sun in Aquarius, it's more of a problem in a general sense. I mean, if you have the sun in Aquarius, that's not a problem. I don't think you need to worry about the sun being in its detriment. It's more, for example, if you're asking a horary chart and a significator is in Aquarius, and when the sun is in Aquarius, I suppose it's a very northern hemisphere biased system, Western astrology. So I suppose you think that high summer, the sun is moving into Leo, so the depths of a northern hemisphere winter, the sun is in Aquarius. But maybe what matters about the sun moving into Aquarius is the fact the sun is moving out of an earth sign and into an air sign. And of course, when the sun moves into Aquarius, it starts making a conjunction to Pluto. And of course, the sun in Aquarius, the ingress of the sun in Aquarius marks the inauguration of Donald Trump, but that's not this week. It's at the beginning of next week, because always when the president gets inaugurated, certainly since the 30s, the sun is at around 1 Aquarius. So with the sun in Aquarius, maybe we can get a little bit of perspective. We can think about what is possible, and maybe we can sort of move beyond the material. So that's a broad picture. I mean, a lot of these aspects I will be talking about over the course of the next week. I might have some, special videos on it. I think my next video, my video for Monday, will include a coverage of the full moon. Let me just turn my phone off. So we'll include a coverage of the full moon in some detail. So let me now think a bit about the North Node. And in my last video, I went through a lot of the signs, covering what it means for each of the 12 signs as the node moves from Aries to Pisces. I'm certainly not going to go through that again, but in theory, it should be a change. How do we see the North Node? So there are, I can think about 3 different ways of looking at the North Node. In sort of traditional Western astrology, the North Node is kind of seen as a bit like Jupiter, and the South Node is seen like Saturn. And it's just a point in the chart. The North Node is a benefic, the South Node is a malefic, and it doesn't necessarily have any broad sort of general significance. Perhaps if it's connected, unless it's connected to a particular planet. Of course, the North Node is conjunct Neptune, and in traditional Western astrology, they didn't know about Neptune, so Neptune wasn't part of the system. But if North Node, but I suppose they might also be interested in the fact that the North Node is moving towards a conjunction of Saturn. So yes, the North Node might be benefic, but it is conjunct Neptune, and is moving towards a conjunction of Saturn as well. So I think that in traditional Western astrology, there wasn't a sort of a great system for dealing with the North Node. I mean, not really. Now, modern Western astrology has a different view of the North Node. There was a book, maybe in 2 books. There was a man called, I think he was called Schulman, and he wrote this book on the North Nodes, and he really, I think, pushed this idea that the North Node represents the future and the South Node represents the past, and it is an axis, and I suppose that ties in with concepts of karma and where we should be moving to. So the North Node in our chart is the direction we should be aiming for. The South Node perhaps represents the past. It maybe represents a previous incarnation. And so in synastry, if you're comparing two charts, if you have connections with the nodes, particularly the South Node, I mean, who knows, that might represent a link with someone, from a previous incarnation. I mean, that is possible, and certainly in terms of my own work with the nodes, when I do people's charts, I think that is by and large a good way of looking at things. I think the North Node does represent where we should be going to, and the South Node is where we should be moving away from. And I suppose, I don't know, like in my own chart, I've got North Node in Leo in the 5th house, and I've got South Node in Aquarius, conjunct Saturn, and in the 11th house, at least using a Placidus house system. And you might say, if you look at these videos, I'm a little bit obsessed with politics. I mean, I'm not saying I know a great deal about politics and I jump to conclusions too much, but I do find politics interesting. And you could say that is my South Node in Aquarius in the 11th house. The 11th house does have a political nature, and so the North Node represents what I should be going to. North Node in Leo in the 5th house, I should perhaps be a little more self-contained, a little more appreciative of my own and other people's creativity. And I need to sort of have a better appreciation for myself and what I can do without worrying about society. At least that's one way I can look at it. So that's a very common view. North Node is also about connections, and the German schools of astrology, like Ebertin and the Hamburg school of Alfred Witter, they see the North Node to an extent as an axis. They don't differentiate so much between the North and the South Node. It's just an axis. And of course, if you take a 45-degree dial or a 90-degree dial, the North and the South Node are actually in the same place. So you don't really distinguish between the North and the South Node. And they are just broadly about connections and who we're meeting, who we're connecting, how we connect. Not close relationships so much, but just connections, those connections we have in society. Now, as far as what's happening at the moment, we have the North Node moving from Aries to Pisces. So I don't know to what extent we can really say that this has some broad collective meaning that we can readily understand. You would think that with the North Node in Aries over the last 18 months, remember the node stays in a sign for about 18 months approximately. So for the last 18 months, North Node in Aries, it's a time where we perhaps need to stand up and tell people what bothers us. If something bothers us, we should not keep it to ourselves. Then you've got the South Node in Libra. Maybe many people have just wanted a quiet life, and they've just accepted things as they are. I mean, maybe not been very happy about it, but just got on with it. Said, well, this is the way it is. There's not much we can do about it, and let's just fit in. We just want to stay out of trouble. But the right thing to do would have been to make a fuss, to take the initiative, to get noticed, to get heard. So I don't know what you think about that. I don't know. Think about your own life. Think about other people. Think about how people behave in a political sense. I mean, I suppose you can always say that people are too quiet. People just want a quiet life. They're too ready to think about themselves and their own inner harmony, even in the face of massive injustice going on. So anyway, that's the North Node in That's a North Node in Aries. Now the North Node has gone back into Pisces, and we've got the South Node in Virgo. And it's somewhat complicated because the North Node is not just in Pisces at the moment, but it's actually conjunct Neptune, and then it's moving towards a conjunction of Saturn. And can we really generalize about this? I mean, the North Node in Pisces, in some ways, it's telling us to be quite accepting. North Node in Pisces, we just need to perhaps move into the chaos. North Node in Pisces over the next 18 months. That over the next 18 months, things are going to be in a process of constant change, and we need to accept the fact that things are in a sense of constant change. The old ways of doing things, the clarity of the old ways is perhaps coming to an end. And I suppose when you think about Pisces, you think about water, you think about boundaries being overwhelmed, and we can be like sort of King Canute. King Canute was this Anglo-Saxon king in English history, and according to the story, he had his throne taken to the I think to the Thames or the Thames estuary, and he wanted to demonstrate the limits of human power, and he tried to sort of command the tide to stop. I mean, he of course knew that the tide wasn't going to stop, but he wanted to demonstrate to his subjects that he as a king could not change the tide, and of course the tide moved up the beach and sort of covered his feet or whatever. So that's a story about King Canute, and I do think that there is a certain feeling of that with Pisces, that we need to accept that there are not clear borders, boundaries, that we have to deal with a great deal of uncertainty. And of course, with the South Node in Virgo, we're trying to make sense of it. I mean, South Node in Virgo may be trying to create immaculately built sandcastles. Everything is measured, everything is absolutely in the right place, it's all wonderfully ordered, and then the tide comes along and it all goes. So we shouldn't think that we can stop time and understand the system and make sense of it, because it's always changing, and this is perhaps how the North Node in Pisces is working. And does that mean that we should just accept things as they are? No, I don't think it does. It just means that we need to understand that we're dealing with a rapidly changing world, and we can't stop it, and we can't think that we can categorize it and sort it, which perhaps South Node in Virgo might want to do. So, I suppose one way of trying to understand the North Node in Pisces might be to look at some events which took place with North Node in Pisces and just try somehow to ask how they might fit the concept of North Node in Pisces. Are they typical of the North Node in Pisces? So, and I think you can see perhaps the good and the bad of North Node in Pisces. And some of these events suggest that the North Node may not actually be as benefic as perhaps is suggested in maybe traditional Western astrology, that the North Node can be a problem, and perhaps we should see Pisces and Virgo as an axis rather than as being two signs that are in conflict with one another. So an example of a North Node in Pisces event was the assassination of Grand Duke Ferdinand on June 28th, 1914. And so the Grand Duke was assassinated in Sarajevo, and as a result of this event, one thing led to another. It happened I think it sort of happened in Serbia. And Austria-Hungary was upset about it, and Austria-Hungary wanted something from Serbia and went to war against Serbia. I mean, I always get confused, but one country went to war against another, and then that activated one alliance and another alliance, and so forth. And in the end, you had the First World War. And so this happened with North Node in Pisces. And so perhaps what this indicates with Mars, I mean, Mars was conjunct the South Node, and the North Node opposition Mars. So, I'm not looking at anything else in the chart. I'm just looking at the North Node. I mean, North Node in Pisces, this perhaps reminds us this is about the overcoming of boundaries. The interrelationship of European politics, and European countries really became clear with North Node in Pisces. One conflict between two countries, just the boundaries just were overwhelmed, and in the end you had a world war. And I suppose you could say that South Node, Moon Mars conjunct the South Node in Virgo. I suppose you might think of the Austro-Hungarian reaction to the assassination of the Grand Duke Ferdinand. Rather than just seeing it as a one-off event, a very tragic one-off event, they instead, wanted to look at the details of the thing and wanted some kind of reparations from Serbia, and Serbia wasn't going to give way, and that's perhaps how it all got out of control. But I think that with the beginning of the First World War taking place with the North Node in Pisces, that makes sense. It's about boundaries being overwhelmed, and having to see things in a global sense. And I suppose that kind of links with what's happening now. I'm not saying we're going to have a First World War, but North Node in Pisces just reminds us that a conflict in one country or between two countries can spread very quickly, and this might alter the nature of certain conflicts. So, I mean, of course, I know we've already got conflicts, but for example, we've got the conflict in Ukraine, we've got potential conflict in the Middle East. But so far, perhaps people's approach over the last 18 months has been North Node in Aries. We've always got to respond. That's North Node in Aries. We've got to take action to protect Ukraine. That's how the US and the West and NATO thinks. It's an action. But now with North Node in Pisces, it's sort of becoming a little more fluid, a little more complicated, and you've got to realize the interconnectedness between things. And now perhaps it's becoming clear. Now, a happy event that took place when the North Node was in Pisces was Brazil winning the World Cup in 1970, and Brazil winning this World Cup. I mean, it was a huge event. Obviously, a huge event for Brazilians, and I suppose one thinks of Pelé and the brilliance of Brazilian football, perhaps as a global phenomena, and it is at a time of a World Cup. And if you look at the chart for when Brazil won the World Cup, it was the North Node was not just in Pisces, but it was in the fifth house. And of course, the fifth house is often connected with sport and recreation. And having the North Node in Pisces, this is an event which in 1970 everyone was able to watch. I mean, I suppose in terms of technology, by 1970 everyone had access to television, so I suppose it was a truly global event, Brazil winning the World Cup. And I mean, I know it sounds perhaps trivial, and I shouldn't just be looking at, because there were so many other things going on in 1970, but I mean, I don't really talk about football and sport very often, but it was an event which of a global nature, and it sort of took place in Mexico City. So it didn't happen in Brazil; it happened in another country, and so that's one way of looking at the North Node. News, it goes everywhere; it spreads, and we shouldn't be seeing things as individuals. Perhaps we should be looking at the collective dimension. And on a political sense, North Node in Pisces may indicate that actions which are not necessarily fortunate. I mean, you can think of the collective with Pisces, and the collective can get out of hand. And I suppose, if you look at 1933, when Hitler came to power. So Hitler came to power on January the 30th, 1933, and the North Node was in Pisces. And there was just so many other things going on, of course, but Nazi Germany had the North Node in Pisces, and I suppose if one wants to try to interpret that, one would say this is perhaps the dark side of Pisces. I mean, how did Hitler get to become Chancellor of Germany? I mean, it was a collective process. While the North Node was moving into Pisces, there were sort of dark themes perhaps emerging in Germany amongst the German populations, many of them who voted for Hitler, and it was perhaps overwhelming. And we had Neptune conjunct the South Node, so Neptune opposition the North Node, and Virgo. I mean, Virgo might be about looking at a problem and trying to define what that problem is, and perhaps trying to come up with simple solutions. I mean, simple solutions, of course, never work, and so that might be how the North Node works. And you do very much have to consider what aspects are being made to the North Node. And in this case, there's true Black Moon Lilith was conjunct the North Node, and true Black Moon Lilith was squaring the nodal axis. It was square Neptune. So true Black Moon Lilith does represent something which is very often dark and unpleasant, and the North Node is kind of bringing it into consciousness. And another example of the North Node in Pisces, something which took place just over a month after Hitler came to power, was the inauguration of Roosevelt. So there is a kind of collective linkage between Hitler coming to power and Roosevelt coming to power. In both sense cases, you have examples of people or governments thinking they can solve a national problem through collective solutions, and the North Node is, that's North Node in Pisces, you could say. And of course, at the time of Roosevelt's inauguration, the North Node was in Pisces, conjunct the midheaven, and so it's perhaps, in terms of both Hitler and Roosevelt, seeing the interconnectedness of society, the broadness of society, and perhaps feeling that you can deal with society as a whole. Now, you might think, oh, well, I'm talking about an Aquarius there, I'm getting it mixed up. And maybe actually we're perhaps looking at the borderlands almost between Aquarius and Pisces. You think that Aquarius and Pisces are two signs that are completely separate from one another, but maybe not. Maybe they kind of merge into each other. And Pisces is about seeing the broader view, the collective view, the interconnectedness of everything, and of course the emotional interconnectedness of everything. So that might be how North Node in Pisces works. I mean, Also, he had South Node, when he was inaugurated, South Node conjunct Neptune on the IC. I mean, that's something hidden, and it may be not. I mean, Neptune, you think of boats, don't you? And you think of the sea, and of course, the big event in FDR's presidency was, of course, Pearl Harbor, and there you had Neptune on South Node on the IC. And the North Node in Pisces can represent perhaps some broader tragedy. You know, we've talked about the Brazil winning the World Cup. Of course, there were other things going on at that time, and also in 1970 we had the Kent State shooting. So Kent State shooting, South Node in Pisces. We had so Kent State shooting was when you had students at Kent State University were protesting against Vietnam, and the National Guard came out, and students were shot, killed, wounded. I think one of them was paralyzed. So it was a dreadful event. And the North Node was in Pisces. I suppose North Node in Pisces, you have to look at what the North Node was aspecting, and here you can see the North Node was aspecting Mars, and sort of aspecting opposition, squaring Mars, opposition true black moon Lilith. And so you're talking an event which has broader global collective feel. You know, that's Pisces. It breaks down boundaries, and Pisces can also represent confusion. I suppose the confusion of the students, and also the confusion of the National Guard. I mean, Pisces is just perhaps sometimes a bit too quick to take action, and because it's all working on an emotional level, and there's sort of fear there. So that might be one way in which the North Node in Pisces was working. And of course, the North Node would have been moving through Pisces, through sort of, when did it go into Pisces? Certainly through 1970. And so, that 1970 was kind of, the end of the 60s. I know it was 1970, but, it was a time of people thinking about the collective and collective problems, global issues. And so that's Kent State shooting. Now, I mean, Pisces might be a time when you might want to think about the suffering of other people. The missionaries of charity. I think this was Mother Teresa's organization, the missionaries of charity, which did her work in Calcutta, and there you have sort of North Node in Pisces. So North Node on Skeet in Pisces. So I don't know what time this organization was founded, but it was founded on October the 7th, 1950. And so I suppose North Node in Pisces might encourage people to think about the suffering of others. And maybe Mercury and Saturn were fairly close to the South Node. I mean, interesting, of course, South Node in Virgo. Of course, Mother Teresa was not a Pisces, she was a Virgo. And so she had South Node in her sun sign at this time. So there is that Virgoan element which is not necessarily particularly healthy. I mean, I suppose Mother Teresa perhaps thinking, well, by abandoning oneself for the sake of others, one also gets the added benefit that one is doing something which can help one get one to heaven, which might be South Node in Virgo. Let's be very specific about it. Of course, Virgo is also about health and the South Node, and there's something, there's maybe something there. But I'm probably reading too much into it. I mean, there were so many other things going on in 1950, and then I'm going to finish off with a few Palestine charts. So you had the Intifada started on December the 9th, 1987. The first Intifada started then with the North Node in Pisces, and you can see that the North Node was square Uranus. And one word you can use to describe Pisces is martyrdom. I mean, martyrdom is something that the Palestinians, they talk about it a lot, and martyrdom is very much venerated, and that's North Node in Pisces. I suppose South Node in Virgo would be an earth sign. I mean, maybe thinking about the material side of things, goods, services, prosperity, but North Node is in Pisces. So I mean, I don't think that martyrdom is necessarily a particularly good thing to be aiming for. So North Node in Pisces, it might not be that it's necessarily something healthy that we move towards, but still, that's what people are moving towards with the North Node in Pisces, particularly on conjunct Skeet, square Uranus, and square Chiron. And Pisces, of course, represents the people. It represents the mob. It represents the crowd. And this is what the Intifada was, very much like, I think. And so, and this North Node in Pisces is very much linked perhaps to the Palestinian identity, because there is this concept of suffering with the North Node in Pisces. So the Palestine is about suffering, and if you look at the chart of Palestine, a year after the Intifada in 1998, when the Palestinian state was declared in Algiers. Again, we've got the North Node in Pisces, and I think there is a problem if you have too many charts with North Node in Pisces in them, that you start to identify with this Pisces, and I suppose it might become suffering for the sake of suffering. I might get into trouble for saying that, but. And that might be perhaps the Palestinian experience, suffering, martyrdom. Of course, the North Node in Pisces is about the broader collective, being able to talk about suffering on a global stage. There are no boundaries to the North Node in Pisces, but in that sense. And of course, Hamas, the final chart I'm looking at is Hamas, was founded at the end of the Intifada. The Intifada was already going on. So when was the Intifada? The Intifada started on December the 9th. Oh, a few days after the Intifada. Hamas was founded. And of course, Hamas has the North Node in Pisces, and it's conjunct Skeet, and North Node is square Uranus, and so it's square Chiron, and so that's Hamas, and there's a sort of a religiousness to it. So you sort of perhaps elevating suffering and martyrdom to the highest levels with North Node in Pisces, and how about North Node is it's square Chiron, square Uranus, and so I mean I think there is a problem here to be too closely identified with the sign Pisces. Anyway, I'm not sure if it was a particularly useful exercise to look at these charts with North Node in Pisces, because there are so many other things to look at, and it is, I think, quite difficult to generalize about the North Node being in one particular sign. So what I want to do now is look at the I Ching, and as usual, just a reminder that if you don't want your I Ching done, then you don't have to have it done. You can just stop watching this video. This I Ching reading only applies to those of you who are watching this video, not just this video, but the I Ching section of this video. And my I Ching reading is going to be in 4 sections. I'm going to start with a general reading, then money, then career and business, and finally relationships. So I asked the question, what is What is the week starting on Monday, January the 13th, 2025, going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got, which I will look at from a general perspective, is hexagram 25, and we've had this hexagram very recently. Innocence. It's about not having any expectations, and and it's always good not to have expectations. We don't expect anything to happen, and I mean, this week is the first full week where we're going to have the North Node in Pisces, and I think there is something about not having expectations. North Node in Pisces, opposition South Node in Virgo. Virgo is trying to analyze things, think about things, perhaps indeed trying to develop expectations, but North Node in Pisces, we need to relax about it, and who knows what's going to happen next. We shouldn't be thinking about things too much, and it's important to do things for their own sake, not because we think, oh well, if we do this, we're going to benefit sooner or later. We just need to do things for our own sake, and we also need to do things that really come easily. We shouldn't necessarily try too hard, and if we find ourselves doing something and we are trying too hard, that might be an indication that we are doing it wrong, because some things have been set up for us. And in fact, when I looked at when I did this hexagram, I think a few days ago, I said something very similar, because I think we got the same moving line. Some things have been set up for us. They're just there for us. We don't have to do much work. It's all there. But maybe we'll want to overcomplicate it. We'll overthink it. South Node in Virgo, overcomplicating things and making things more complicated than they need be, focusing on irrelevant details, but it's all there for us. And so that's looking good. But over the course of a week, it is possible that there is a hiccup. And the problem is the third line moves. And the third line moving may indicate that there may be a misfortune. Not a super serious misfortune, but the kind of misfortune where one loses something. It belongs to us, and it just gets taken. And so there might be a warning here that we have to be very careful in terms of, making sure things don't get stolen. Perhaps our ideas could get stolen, or it could be ideas. It just could be our things. So if we're careless, I think that the image that I Ching uses is if we tether our cow or our horse next to our house, someone just walks away and takes it. Some stranger walks through the village and just decides to take it. And so, in terms of our material belongings, I think it's just very important to be careful, and not actually to plan too much for the future, because I suppose I know we're supposed to plan for the future. This is the only place that I've read in terms of what you should do. If you read anything, you're always told to plan for the future. You're supposed to create savings, and you're supposed to have investments, and you're supposed to have a pension, and all this kind of stuff. This is the only place, I Ching, that I have come across that tells you not to plan for the future. This one moving line tells you, if you plan for the future, you are messing your future up, and you put money aside for the future, it just gets taken. This is a very strange thing, and I think one tries to perhaps work out what it actually means. And I think perhaps the problem here is it's not that we're necessarily planning for the future. It's in terms of putting some money down or having savings. It's that we are trying to second guess the future. And that if we try to second guess the future, we say, oh, we know what's going to happen next, South Node in Virgo, then something will be taken from us. But if we are more relaxed about it and we accept that we don't know what the future is going to bring, then that is going to be much easier for us. And then you have the fourth line moving, and it's a kind of an antidote to the third line. And the third line is about perhaps something being taken from us. The fourth line is reminding us that if something is ours, and if it really is ours, it really, really does belong to us, then it can't be taken away from us. And at the same time, we shouldn't be struggling too much, because, and particularly we shouldn't be struggling too much for, I don't know, something we want. There may be something we want. We may have to put a lot of effort into getting it, or we may feel we have to put a lot of effort into getting it. But we need to remember that this hexagram is 25, which is innocence. If we struggle, if we strive, if we demand, then that's going to be picked up, and people are not going to trust us. But if we just are relaxed about it, we just take the view, if something is coming our way, it's only going to come our way if we deserve it. If we deserve it, we'll get it. If we don't deserve it, we won't get it. And then, that is going to make things a whole lot easier for us. Now let's turn to I suppose I should say, that is the first hexagram. We do have 3 moving lines. So, and all of this moves to hexagram number 9. So hexagram number 9 is the taming power of the small. And the taming power of the small, kind of the small is perhaps us. That's perhaps us striving, trying to make something, trying to create something, and perhaps putting in too much energy. And again, that might link to South Node in Virgo. And now that the nodes have just changed sign, let's just try to sort of emphasize those nodes. South Node in Virgo is just spending a lot of time, taming power of a small, on small petty activities, and this is not what we should be doing. And we perhaps need to tame ourselves, and we need to perhaps tame our impulses. And we've just come from innocence, but still we're still thinking, is it going to happen, is it not going to happen? And we might feel we have to ask questions. We might have to try to draw attention to ourselves, and that I don't think is such a good idea. And it's a taming power of the small. And one of the things that I Ching says about the taming power of the small is dense clouds, no rain. That's like, in fact, I Ching says that a lot. So we shouldn't expect immediate results, and we shouldn't get nervous if we don't get the results. We need to remember the previous hexagram, which is innocence. Just wait. When the time is right, you'll get what you deserve. Turning to the issue of money, and with money, I mean, we shouldn't be too desperate for money with this hexagram innocence. I mean innocence is telling us, we don't necessarily know when the money is going to arrive. I think if money is important, we may feel that we're in a hurry, but if we think about money too much, and if we put too much effort into getting money, it might actually be self-defeating, especially if other people are concerned. I mean, I think if we are looking for money, wanting to be paid some money or whatever, and we start to bother people, they're going to not be very sympathetic, and we may not actually get what we want. So just relax, and actually in the first instance try not to think too much about money. So do something because you enjoy it, not because you're thinking about the rewards, and just do something for its own sake, and you're thinking about the present, not about future benefits. Then we do have this line coming up, which the third line from the bottom, which is about something being taken from you. Now that means that financially there could be a moment of danger over the week where you lose money gets taken. Maybe there's a possibility of you being too trusting. I mean, we talked about tethering your cow next to your house, and I suppose any stranger can take it. So don't just make your money readily available, and do look after your money, because there just could be something stupid happens, and as a result of something stupid happening, you haven't done anything wrong, but it just gets taken from you. So watch out for your money and your possessions, and make sure everything's locked up, and don't show off what you have. And I don't know, if you're walking around town carrying things, make sure they're not taken from you. I don't know whether we're living in an age of higher crime. I suppose it depends where you are, but crime could be an issue, so that's something to watch for. And then the fourth line moves of this hexagram, innocence, and the fourth line is a good line, and it's perhaps telling you to relax about money, and it's really saying if money is yours, then you will get that money, and you do not have to be too pushy. In fact, by not mentioning money, perhaps in a situation where you feel you should be mentioning money, then you may be creating the right impression, but you'll get what's owed to you anyway. At least that's what the I Ching is suggesting. I'm not here to make financial advice. This video is for entertainment purposes only. And of course, in the third line, which I've just come back from, there is this piece of crazy advice saying that if you put money, suggesting that if you put money away for the future, you do the sensible thing. It's not going to be the sensible thing. You might actually lose it. So I don't know what that means. It might mean that you think it's sensible to do something highly dangerous and speculative with your money, for example. But if you are putting money aside for the future over the week, I suppose think about what you're doing. Again, I'm not giving financial advice here, but think about what you're doing, get alternative opinions, and maybe this week is not the week for committing yourself to savings plans or signing up to a pension or whatever. Maybe you should wait till next week. Maybe you should find an alternative advisor, alternative company, get a different view. So there is a bit of a need for caution there. It depends on what you do. I mean, money may not be important this week, so in which case what I'm saying may not be relevant to you. Now, this hexagram innocence does move. It moves to hexagram 9, which is the taming power of the small. And in terms of money, I think it's important that you don't be too ambitious this week. You don't assume that things are going to come your way, and if things don't come your way, you need to be kind of relaxed about it. But there is this sort of danger with the taming power of the small of just too much activity. I do think with this hexagram, I kind of think of a rodent, sort of some kind of rodent frantically trying to create something, just moving from place to place, spinning on its wheel, tearing up bits of paper, tearing up bits of straw, as rodents tend to do. And so you could do this, and it's all a big mess, and it gets you nowhere. And it could get you worse than nowhere if you're asking people lots of questions. You keep asking, where is the money coming? Is it coming in? Is it going to come today? Is it going to come tomorrow? Can you tell me when it's going to come in? That kind of thing. You don't want to be too pushy with money, with the taming power of the small, and you need to just realize, back to that image of dense clouds, no rain. Just because money is not coming this week, just because that money you're perhaps expecting, or some news isn't coming this week, doesn't mean you have to make a fuss about it. Next week is perhaps going to be different. And then there is career and business. So in terms of career and business, it's probably not a week for having completely clear plans. I mean, if you really think, you think about it, and you think you want everything to be in order, you have a clear idea about how things how you want things to proceed, then you might be disappointed. And perhaps this is a reminder with the nodal axis that we have, the North Node in Pisces, South Node in Virgo. South Node in Virgo really does want things to be properly organized, and you want to know where you are. Whether in your work, if you have a business, you're going to want to know where things are. But the I Ching is suggesting that you just be more relaxed. So you perhaps feel you want to do something, and you just go and you just do it because you enjoy doing it, because it feels like the right thing to do. And at the same time, though, there is an indication that you're going to be more successful in some areas than in other areas. You may feel that in terms of work and business, that you can tell that you're doing the right thing if you're working hard. If you're working super hard, then you might feel you really are doing the right thing. But that's not necessarily the case. It may be a time where if you're doing something that is easy, that you enjoy doing, that actually you're doing the right thing. And it does seem that fate has kind of prepared certain areas for you which are easy, where you don't have to do any preparation, where you don't have to really destroy yourself to get results. So if something is easy from a work point of view, then stick with it. Just don't make things more difficult than they need to be, because the week can actually start off on quite an easy note. And of course, don't feel that you should be looking for immediate results, because this hexagram is about innocence. It's about being naive. Now, we do have the third line moving, and the third line moving can be about some kind of misfortune, something being taken from you. I mean, it could be perhaps a piece of business taken from you, or perhaps you a little bit too naive and you lose an advantage, or someone takes a credit for something you have done. So that is a possibility. I wouldn't get too worked up about it. And I think in terms of someone taking the credit for something you've done, it may be the reason this has happened is because you have put too much work into something, and you're told you're supposed to put a lot of work into something, but it may be that you put a lot of work into something, you don't even enjoy it, and what happens? Well, someone else takes the credit, and it could be something like that. And I wouldn't worry about it too much, because the fourth line moves, and the fourth line is about you being able to just benefit from something without necessarily having to put too much work into it. And there's also this reminder about your own abilities and your talents and what you have. If something is genuinely yours, it can't be taken from you. So you might, for example, be concerned that someone takes the credit, but for what something you've done. But in the end, you are who you are, and if you have sort of a fairly modest approach, what makes you special, will eventually be recognised. But you don't have to, you don't have to try too hard in your working and business environment. And then this hexagram, innocence, it does move to hexagram number 9, which is the taming power of the small. So the taming power of the small, there's still a sense that you are feeling that you want to do something, and it's actually possible to do too much. You might be just too busy. Focusing on one small thing excessively. South Node in Virgo, perhaps. And if you do that, then it may actually be counterproductive. And so I think you do need to be relaxed, not expect immediate results. Because remember, the previous hexagram was innocence. That's not having expectations. If you have expectations, you're killing your luck, basically, aren't you? So you move to the taming power of the small. Just be satisfied with small gains, doing what you feel comfortable, and in the end, the rewards will come your way. And finally, there is relationships. Well, relationships is an area that you shouldn't take it too seriously. And I think that, in astrology, relationships are arguably the most difficult thing. I know that relationships are something that people are often obsessed about. That's possibly, the number one or number two concern of many people consulting astrologers. And to be honest, I think that people should not actually consult astrologers about relationships in many cases. I mean, particularly if it's the situation where someone sees someone they like, and is there any possibility of this relationship happening? That kind of question should never be taken to an astrologer. That might sound a weird thing to say, but the very act of going to an astrologer shows that at an unconscious level it's hopeless, and that's the way it is. And I think I'm often, well, not often, but I have been criticised, I think, for being a little too harsh sometimes about the area of relationships, constructive criticism. But that's me, and I suppose with innocence, and relationships, of course, this section covers relationships, whatever their nature, of all kinds, not just romantic relationships. It may be professional relationships, just friendships, whatever. And with innocence, just don't have any expectations of anyone. Don't believe that anyone is going to behave in a particular way, that they're going to give you what you want, and just accept people for what they are and take every moment as it happens. And so, if you're trying to get on with someone, just talk to them and think about the next minute, but don't go beyond the situation. So that is the best way for getting on with people, and for forming relationships, and for safeguarding relationships, and for strengthening relationships. Don't have expectations, because expectations are a real buzz killer. And then we have the third line moves in this, sort of the third line from the bottom, and that is a little bit dangerous here. And there is a danger that, well, I suppose it could be that a relationship is undermined for no particular reason. I suppose in an extremely narrow situation, where you're in a relationship with someone and someone else steals them. I mean, I think that's unlikely, but I suppose it happens. So you might feel you're developing a relationship with someone for whatever reason, and a third party comes along and takes this person away. So that could be romantic, it could be business, it could be something else. So and you might feel that's unfair. Of course, no one is your personal property, and so that just might seem to be a case of, whatever, all's fair in love and war and all that kind of stuff. But again, don't have any expectations. And then, of course, the fourth line moves, and with the fourth line moving, is basically saying it is what it is. If you deserve to be with someone, if you should be with someone, if you are destined to be with someone, you will be with them, and nothing can take that away. And so if you feel that a relationship is not working out, or is you're falling apart with someone, or you have a you feel that there's a certain incompatibility, well, that's just what it is. You can't be compatible with everyone. But the fourth line is saying that if you have a completely sort of innocent approach, then people that belong to one another will naturally come together. No power on earth can stop them, and so that is how the fourth line might manifest. And then this hexagram moves to hexagram number 9, which is the taming power of the small. And the taming power of the small is it's kind of more of the same. It's just don't put too much effort into the details of a relationship. Don't feel that you need to know too much about someone. Don't be too critical of another person. South Node in Virgo. South Node in Virgo can be critical. Just accept people for what they are, and don't expect anything dramatic to happen in a relationship, in any relationship you're in. And because again, I Ching says dense clouds, no rain. Now that doesn't mean to say nothing is going to happen in the end, but I'm just looking at things from the perspective of this week. And that's it. That's all I've got to say about the week starting on January the 13th. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to indicate that you liked it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thank you very much for watching again, and I will talk to you again very soon.